Sexual sin has been a pervasive issue throughout human history, and regrettably, it continues to endure in today's society, even inside the limits of religious institutions. The normalization and glorification of sexual misconduct in current culture have led many to assume that partaking in such actions is not only acceptable, but expected. This alarming trend has reached a stage where abstaining from these behaviors could earn one the reputation of being weird or out of touch with the times, rather than being praised for their commitment to purity and sanctity. Regrettably, this destructive thinking has also permeated religious communities, where moral breaches are sometimes overlooked to avoid looking unduly righteous or judgmental. In this lecture, we shall go into what can be described as the 4 stages of sexual sin, with a particular emphasis on adultery and fornication. The eyes, the gateway to temptation. Every incidence of fornication and adultery, no matter how intricate or nuanced, has its roots in the visual. The journey towards such deeds typically begins with the eyes. What we choose to fixate upon profoundly influences our near future, ultimately molding our choices. The eyes, frequently referred to as the windows to the soul, serve as the guiding light for our complete being. Whatever attracts our eyes becomes the object of our body, mind, and even our brain's engagement. When one gazes upon another person with lusty intentions, they accidentally draw lust into their lives. The availability of immoral images and content on the internet provides sufficient opportunity for lust to penetrate one's thoughts. Once the spirit of lust takes hold, breaking free from its embrace becomes increasingly tough. Thus, shielding one's eyes becomes crucial in rejecting the seduction of sexual transgression. This requires not just refraining from actively seeking out explicit material, but also removing any sources of temptation that might lead to such behavior. By carefully regulating what we allow ourselves to perceive, we may effectively stop the loop that leads to unethical actions. The act, from temptation to action. After the eyes have been exposed to explicit or enticing stuff, the mind registers and processes it. The 3rd stage is often to act in accordance with the thoughts that have been provoked. It's vital to recognize that adultery and fornication are never spontaneous actions. They are rather the consequence of a steady building of impulses within an individual. Society's increasing acceptability of these practices contributes to people succumbing to their tendencies. The repercussions that were once perceived as substantial deterrents are frequently neglected in favor of immediate enjoyment. The process of justifying and rationalizing these activities becomes a slippery slope that many persons find themselves on. Adultery and fornication are no longer considered as taboo, but rather as regular and accepted practices. This normalization severely affects the moral fabric of society and erodes the obstacles that once prevented such breaches. The invisible stage, emotional and spiritual consequences. Engaging in adultery or fornication establishes a significant emotional and spiritual connection with the individual involved. Sexual intimacy develops a link between 2 individuals that goes beyond the physical act itself. This tie continues to remain even if future partnerships are created with different individuals. This occurrence is typically missed, since society tends to focus primarily on the physical element of these behaviors. The emotional consequences of such connections can lead to emotions of perplexity, guilt, and inner conflict. People may find themselves divided between numerous partners, attempting to navigate the complicated emotions that result from these intertwined relationships. This invisible stage is often where the most lasting and deep consequences of sexual immorality manifest. Mess and regret, confronting the fallout. At this final stage, the repercussions of sexual misbehavior come to the foreground. Shame, remorse, addiction, and persistent problems are the inevitable repercussions of indulging in these acts. The narrative of King David provides us a striking example of this time. His unlawful association with Bathsheba led to a sequence of events that culminated in misery and remorse. He attempted to dodge accountability and responsibility for his acts, but the weight of his sins eventually caught up with him, culminating in public humiliation and personal anguish. Overcoming the hold of sexual immorality takes a diversified strategy. Accepting Jesus Christ into one's life is frequently a critical step in seeking atonement and strength. Equipping oneself with the whole armor of God, as indicated in biblical teachings, provides the necessary tools to battle the pull of temptation. It's important to know that attempting to traverse this journey alone is useless. Finding help from a community of believers and spiritual mentors is vital for enduring change. In the war against sexual sin, the first line of defense is in guarding one's eyes and consciously removing the sources of temptation that lead to lusty thoughts. Making a personal resolve to stop from fixating on sexual ideas is a vital step in this path. It's crucial to remember that many individuals who possess better courage and willpower than oneself have fallen prey to these temptations. Thus, adopting proactive precautions to guard oneself from the temptation of sexual sin is not a sign of weakness, but rather a witness to one's devotion to preserving their integrity and honoring their spiritual journey. By knowing and navigating the 4 stages of sexual sin, individuals can equip themselves with the information and resources needed to withstand the pull of temptation and pursue a life of purity and spiritual pleasure.